It is strange, but Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, loved food. Not just loved it, but really adored it. His tastes were simple, sometimes extreme. Think about it. This man, a global icon, often chose a regular, greasy spoon over fancy dining. He ate like someone from his poor Mississippi childhood. He did not forget where he came from. And his food choices. They tell a story about comfort, about taste, about simple pleasure. But also a story about chemistry, about biology, about physics. Because every bite, every flavor, every texture is a science experiment. You know, what happens when fat meets sugar? When salt is added to protein, why do we crave certain things? Why did Elvis crave these things? We can look at his favorite meals. We can break them down. Not to judge him, but to understand the food itself. To see the science hidden in plain sight. In the fried chicken, the mashed potatoes, the banana pudding. It is all there. How does the Maillard reaction make food brown and delicious? What does fat do to our taste buds? How does sugar change our brain? You know, these are not just questions for scientists. They are questions for anyone who eats. And everyone eats. So, we can peel back the layers. See the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates, see the chemical changes from cooking. See the history too, the stories of these foods. The science is fascinating even in a simple meal. It is right there on the plate. Number 17 does a peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwich. Hold the secrets to ultimate comfort. Then Elvis's most famous food is probably the grilled peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwich. Sometimes called the Fool's Gold Loaf when served on a whole hollowed-out loaf of bread from the Colorado Mine Company restaurant in Denver, a specific event in 1976 when Elvis flew his private jet from Memphis to Denver, and back just to get this sandwich. It is a legendary meal, and it is a powerful combination of flavors and textures. Let us look at the peanut butter first. It is an emulsion. That means tiny droplets of oil are spread through a water-based matrix. Peanuts themselves are high in fat, about 50% by weight. Most of this is unsaturated fat, like oleic acid. When peanuts are roasted, the Maillard reaction happens. This is a complex chemical process between amino acids and reducing sugars. It gives peanuts their distinctive roasted, savory, slightly sweet flavor and brown color. Well, Dr. Louis Camille Maillard first described this reaction in 1912. It is responsible for many of the great smells and tastes in cooked food, from bread crusts to roasted coffee. The salt in peanut butter also plays a big role. Salt does not just make things taste salty. It enhances other flavors, making the sweetness of the banana and the savoriness of the bacon more noticeable. Some research suggests salt can even suppress bitter notes. Next, the banana. These bananas are full of sugars, mostly sucrose, fructose, and glucose when ripe. They also have pectin, a type of soluble fiber that gives ripe bananas their soft, sometimes mushy texture. As a banana ripens, enzymes like amylase break down starches into these simpler sugars. This makes the banana sweeter and softer. The volatile organic compounds in bananas create their unique sweet, fruity aroma. Isoamyl acetate is a major one, a compound also found in some synthetic flavors. The warmth from grilling the sandwich can intensify these aromas. The banana's natural sweetness perfectly balances the saltiness of the bacon. Then there is the bacon. Bacon is mostly fat and protein. When you cook bacon, the fat renders. That means the solid fat melts and some of it drains away. This is primarily triglyceride molecules turning into a liquid state. The protein in the bacon, mostly muscle fibers, denatures and cooks. The Maillard reaction happens here too, as the bacon browns and crisps. This creates hundreds of new flavor compounds, like pyrazines and furans. The salt used to cure bacon is also important. It draws out moisture and concentrates flavor, while also preventing spoilage. This is an ancient food preservation technique. Dr. Michael Moss, in his book Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us, talks about how these three ingredients, salt, sugar, and fat, are engineered to hit our bliss point. This is the optimal amount of a food component that makes us want more. The peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwich is a masterclass in hitting that bliss point. Finally, the bread. When grilled or fried, the bread undergoes its own transformation. The starches gelatinize. The Maillard reaction occurs on the surface, creating a crisp, browned crust with new flavors. The fat from the peanut butter and bacon soaks into the bread, making it even more satisfying. This combination of textures, creamy peanut butter, soft banana, crisp bacon, and crunchy bread is a feast for the senses. This sandwich is not just food, it is a perfect storm of flavor science. It is high in calories, offering instant energy. A typical version can easily be over 800 calories, sometimes much more depending on the amount of bacon and peanut butter. This kind of food was common in the post-WIW American South, a time when hearty, energy-dense meals were seen as good and plentiful. But what if we still do not fully understand why some people are so drawn to this specific combination? Could there be unknown genetic predispositions that make individuals react more strongly to high fat, high sugar, high salt foods? And how much does our early childhood diet, perhaps shaped by socioeconomic factors, permanently alter our adult food preferences in ways we cannot easily reverse? What if the brain's reward system, when triggered by such specific food combinations, shares more pathways with other forms of addiction than we are comfortable admitting? Number 16, why did fried chicken become a pillar of Southern comfort? Fried chicken was a staple in Elvis's diet, a true symbol of Southern comfort food. It is hot, crispy, juicy, and flavorful, but what makes it so appealing, beyond just personal preference? It is a fascinating mix of chemistry and cooking technique. The chicken itself is mostly protein, fat, and water. When you fry it, several key things happen. First, the chicken is usually coated in flour or a batter. This coating, often seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes paprika or other spices, is crucial. When it hits the hot oil, the water in the batter quickly turns to steam. This steam creates tiny air pockets, making the crust light and crispy. This is similar to what happens when you bake bread, where steam helps the crust form. The temperature of the oil is very important, typically around 350 to 375 deg F, 175 to 190 deg C. At this temperature, the Maillard reaction takes place on the surface of the chicken and the batter. This browning reaction creates hundreds of new flavor compounds. These compounds are a big part of why fried chicken tastes so good. They give it a complex, savory, roasted flavor that is hard to get any other way. The proteins in the chicken also denature, meaning they unwind and coagulate, which gives the meat its firm, cooked texture. And then there is the fat. Frying food in oil means the food absorbs some of that oil. This adds to the flavor and changes the texture. Fat carries flavor molecules, distributing them across the palate. It also creates a rich, satisfying mouthfeel. Research shows that fat also plays a role in our satiety, making us feel full. Dr. Stephen Witherly, in his book, Why Humans Like Junk Food, talks about how the combination of fat and crunchiness is incredibly rewarding to our brains. The crispy exterior and moist interior of well-fried chicken are a perfect example of this. The history of fried chicken is also tied to the American South. Frying as a cooking method was brought to the region by Scottish immigrants, who had a tradition of frying chicken in fat. Enslaved African Americans then adopted and adapted the technique, often using seasonings and spices from their own culinary traditions, making it into the dish we recognize today. It became a celebratory meal, often prepared for special occasions. Colonel Harlan Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, popularized the specific pressure frying method that allowed for faster, more consistent cooking of fried chicken, starting in the 1930s and expanding in the 1950s, right as Elvis was becoming famous. This made fried chicken a readily available fast food option. A typical piece of fried chicken, depending on the cut and breading, can contain a significant amount of calories and fat. A single fried chicken breast might have over 300 calories and 20 grams of fat. This caloric density made it a valuable food source in times when food was scarcer. But we still do not fully grasp the precise interplay between the myriad Maillard compounds and human taste receptors. Could there be undiscovered compounds that contribute significantly to the Frida flavor we find so appealing? And how much does the specific molecular structure of the fat used for frying, say vegetable oil versus lard, influence our long-term health beyond simple caloric intake? What if the gut microbiome of an individual, developed from their ancestral diet, dictates their personal preference for certain fried food flavors? Number 15, what makes mashed potatoes so universally comforting? And mashed potatoes, usually with gravy, were another favorite for Elvis. This seems like a simple dish, but it is a scientific marvel of starch, fat, and texture. It is smooth, creamy, and deeply satisfying. Potatoes are mostly starch, specifically amylose and amylopectin. Raw potatoes have firm cell walls. When you cook them, usually by boiling, these cell walls break down. The starch granules swell and rupture, releasing amylose and amylopectin into the water. This process is called starch gelatinization. As the potatoes cook and cool, these starches form a gel-like structure. When you mash potatoes, you are physically breaking them down further. If you overmash them, especially with a food processor, the starch granules can break too much, releasing too much amylose. This causes the amylose molecules to bind together, making the potatoes gummy and gluey. The key is to mash them just enough to achieve that fluffy, creamy texture, but not so much that they become pasty. Different potato varieties like Russet's high starch, low moisture versus Yukon Gold's medium starch, medium moisture behave differently when mashed. Russets are great for fluffy mashed potatoes, while Yukon Golds offer a naturally buttery flavor and creamy texture. But mashed potatoes alone would be bland. This is where fat comes in, usually in the form of butter or cream. Fat coats the starch molecules and prevents them from clumping together too much, which helps create a smooth, rich mouthfeel. The butter adds not just fat, but also dairy solids and flavor compounds like diacetyl, which has a distinct buttery taste. The salt added to mashed potatoes also enhances all these flavors, making the potatoes taste more potato-y, more buttery. And then there is the gravy. Gravy is often made from meat drippings, thickened with a roux, a mixture of fat and flour, or cornstarch. The meat drippings contain soluble proteins, fats, and savory umami compounds from the meat. These compounds, like glutamates, contribute to the deep, rich flavor. The thickening agent, whether it is flour or cornstarch, also undergoes starch gelatinization when heated, creating a thick, pourable sauce. The combination of the smooth, creamy potatoes with the warm, savory gravy is a classic comfort food. It hits many sensory points: soft texture, rich flavor, and warmth. Potatoes became a staple crop in Europe and then North America after their introduction from the Andes. By the mid-20th century in America, they were cheap, filling, and versatile. A serving of mashed potatoes with gravy can easily add 200 to 300 calories, primarily from carbohydrates and fat. This provided significant energy for people who often performed physically demanding work or simply enjoyed the filling nature of such a meal. But what is the precise neurological mechanism by which the combination of soft texture and savory richness creates such a profound sense of comfort in the human brain? Are there specific types of starch molecules that interact uniquely with our digestive system, influencing mood or satiety signals in ways we do not yet understand? And how much does the cultural association with home and nurturing actually rewire our brain's perception and enjoyment of a dish like mashed potatoes, separate from its inherent chemical properties? Number 14, how did macaroni and cheese become America's beloved pasta dish? Macaroni and cheese, a creamy, cheesy, baked dish, was another of Elvis's go-to comfort foods. It is a simple concept but complex in its appeal, combining carbohydrates, fat, and umami in a delicious way. The pasta, usually elbow macaroni, is made from durum wheat. It is primarily starch. When cooked, the starch granules absorb water, swell, and gelatinize, becoming soft and pliable. The gluten network in the wheat gives the pasta its structure. The cheese sauce is where most of the magic happens. A classic cheese sauce, like a bechamel base, starts with a roux, which is fat, butter, and flour cooked together. The flour, mostly starch, thickens the sauce through gelatinization when liquid milk is added and heated. The milk itself is an emulsion of fat and water, with suspended proteins, casein, and lactose milk sugar. When cheese is added, things get interesting. Cheese is a complex food, primarily milk proteins, casein, fats, and water. During cheese making, rennet enzymes coagulate casein proteins, and then the cheese is aged. As cheese ages, proteins break down into smaller peptides and amino acids, particularly glutamate. Glutamate is a key contributor to umami, the savory fifth taste. Cheddar cheese, a common choice for mac and cheese, is rich in these umami compounds. Sodium citrate is sometimes used in cheese sauces, especially in processed cheeses. This salt acts as an emulsifying salt. It helps to separate the casein proteins, preventing the fat from separating from the protein and making the sauce smoother and creamier. Without it, the fat in the cheese can grease out when heated, leading to a grainy, oily sauce. This is a common problem when trying to melt natural cheeses. The baking process in macaroni and cheese is also important. The top layer often gets a little brown and crispy, thanks to the Maillard reaction. This adds a new layer of flavor and texture, a contrast to the creamy interior. The heat helps the flavors meld and the sauce to thicken further. The concept of combining pasta and cheese goes back centuries, with references to cheese and pasta dishes found in medieval cookbooks. Thomas Jefferson is often credited with introducing macaroni and cheese to America in the early 19th century, bringing a pasta machine and a recipe from France. By the mid-20th century, especially with the introduction of Kraft macaroni and cheese dinner in 1937, it became a widely accessible, inexpensive, and quick meal. This made it a common dish in many American homes, including those like Elvis's where comfort and familiarity were prized. A typical serving of homemade mac and cheese can be around 400 to 500 calories, a significant source of energy. But do we truly understand how the specific sequence of amino acids in casein proteins breaks down into such potent umami compounds during cheese making and cooking? Could there be unknown synergistic effects between different cheese varieties that create entirely new flavor profiles beyond what we currently identify? And if fat is so crucial for mouthfeel and flavor delivery, are there specific molecular structures of dietary fats that we are only beginning to understand in terms of how they interact with our brain's pleasure centers? Number 13, what makes meatloaf a timeless comfort food? Meatloaf was another simple, hearty meal Elvis enjoyed. It is a classic American dish made from ground meat, often beef, mixed with binders and seasonings, then baked. It is the epitome of home cooking for many. The primary ingredient in meatloaf is ground meat. This is typically beef, but it can be a mix of beef, pork, or veal. The fat content in the ground meat is important. It adds flavor, moisture, and helps keep the meatloaf tender. Leaner meatloaf can be dry. During baking, some of the fat renders out, but enough remains to contribute to the texture and taste. The binders are crucial. These often include breadcrumbs, crackers, or oatmeal, soaked in milk or water, and eggs. The starches in the breadcrumbs and oats absorb moisture, preventing the meatloaf from drying out and helping it hold its shape. The proteins in the eggs, particularly albumin, coagulate when heated. This acts as a glue, binding the ingredients together. Without these binders, the meatloaf would crumble apart. Seasonings are also vital. Onions, garlic, salt, pepper, and herbs like parsley or thyme are common. These add depth of flavor. Onions and garlic, when cooked, undergo their own chemical transformations, releasing sulfur compounds that contribute to their characteristic aromas and tastes. Salt, as always, enhances all the other flavors, making the meat taste more savory. When meatloaf bakes, the Maillard reaction occurs on the surface, creating a flavorful browned crust. Inside, the proteins in the meat denature, and the fat melts and coats the protein fibers, keeping the meatloaf moist. The juices from the meat and vegetables mingle, creating a complex savory profile. Often, meatloaf is topped with a glaze, like ketchup or a brown sugar mixture. The sugars in these glazes caramelize when baked, adding a sweet, tangy contrast to the savory meat. Meatloaf has roots in ancient European peasant dishes that combine ground meat with other ingredients to make the meat go further. It became particularly popular in America during the Great Depression as an economical way to feed a family. During World War II, rationing encouraged resourceful cooking, and meatloaf became a patriotic staple. By the 1950s and 60s, it was firmly established as a common, comforting dinner. A standard slice of meatloaf, depending on its size and fat content, can easily be 300 to 400 calories, a substantial and satisfying meal. But what precise chemical reactions occur between the various proteins and starches from the meat and binders that create the specific tender, cohesive texture of a well-made meatloaf? Or could there be overlooked interactions between the sulfur compounds from onions and garlic and the Maillard products of the meat that contribute to its unique savory depth? And how much does a specific blend of fat types, whether from beef, pork, or a combination, truly impact not just flavor, but also the long-term hedonic response to such a food? Number 12, why do biscuits and gravy feel so deeply satisfying? Biscuits and gravy, a classic Southern breakfast, was another meal Elvis would have eaten. This is a pairing of fluffy, flaky baked goods with a rich, savory, creamy sauce. It is pure comfort. Let us start with the biscuits. Biscuits are a quick bread, meaning they are leavened with baking powder or baking soda, not yeast. Baking powder is a chemical leavening agent. It contains an acid and a base, often baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, that react when wet and heated, releasing carbon dioxide gas. This gas creates bubbles in the dough, making the biscuits rise and become light and fluffy. The fat In biscuits, usually butter or shortening is critical. It is cut into the flour, creating layers. As the biscuits bake, the fat melts, releasing steam. The steam pushes up the layers of dough, creating those distinctive flaky layers. This is similar to how puff pastry works, but with less fat and fewer layers. The gluten in the flour provides the structure. You do not want to overmix biscuit dough because too much gluten development will make the biscuits tough. The gravy, typically a sausage gravy, is where the savory depth comes in. It starts with cooking sausage, usually pork sausage. As the sausage cooks, its fat renders out and the meat browns. This browning, again, is the Maillard reaction, creating rich, savory flavors. Then flour is added to the rendered fat to make a roux. This roux is cooked for a few minutes to cook out the raw flour taste. Then milk is slowly whisked in. The starch in the flour gelatinizes, thickening the milk into a creamy sauce. Black pepper and often more salt are added for seasoning. The fat from the sausage, the richness of the milk, and the savory notes from the brown sausage and pepper make for a very flavorful sauce. The combination of the warm, soft, flaky biscuit, which acts like a sponge, soaking up the hot, savory, peppery gravy, is what makes this dish so good. The textures and temperatures play off each other perfectly. Biscuits and gravy emerged as a staple in the southern United States in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Biscuits were an inexpensive bread alternative, and gravy made with leftover meat drippings was a way to make a filling meal. It became a particularly common breakfast for laborers, providing a high-calorie, energy-dense start to the day. A typical serving can easily be 600 to 800 calories, or even more, making it a very substantial meal. But what is the optimal ratio of fat to flour in a biscuit that creates the perfect balance of flakiness and tenderness? And could this be scientifically measured and reproduced with absolute precision? Are there specific compounds in cooked sausage fat that trigger a deeper sense of satiety in the human brain compared to other fats? Or is it purely the caloric density? And how much does the psychological association of this specific breakfast with tradition and heritage influence its perceived deliciousness, overriding purely physiological responses? Number 11, why are hamburgers such a global sensation? Hamburgers were a clear favorite for Elvis, a classic American meal. He could eat several at a time. It is a simple dish ground beef, a bun, and toppings, but it is a complex flavor and texture experience. At the core is the ground beef patty. The fat content in the beef is crucial. Typically, a good burger has 15 to 25% fat. This fat does several things. It keeps the patty moist and juicy as it cooks, it adds flavor, and it prevents the patty from becoming too dense and tough. As the patty cooks, the fat melts, some renders out, and some coats the protein fibers. When the patty hits a hot griddle or grill, the Maillard reaction begins immediately on the surface. This creates that desirable brown crust and hundreds of new flavor compounds, giving the burger its savory, beefy taste. The proteins in the meat also denature and coagulate, firming up the patty. Overcooking a burger dries it out and makes it tough, because too much moisture is lost and proteins tighten too much. The bun is not just a holder. It is usually a soft, enriched bread, often made with some sugar and fat. When lightly toasted, the surface of the bun undergoes its own browning and slight crisping, adding another textural layer. The starches in the bun gelatinize and then dehydrate slightly on the surface, creating a desirable texture. The bun also acts as a counterpoint to the rich, savory patty, soaking up some of the juices. Toppings add even more layers. Cheese, if added, melts over the hot patty. Cheese is an emulsion of fat, protein, and water. When heated, the fat liquefies and the protein network loosens, creating that gooey, molten texture. Pickles add acidity, cutting through the richness. Ketchup and mustard add sweetness, tang, and often spices, which interact with the burger's savory flavors. The salt in everything, from the patty to the condiments, enhances the overall taste. The hamburger's origins are debated, but it became popular in America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, often served at fairs and diners. Its affordability, portability, and satisfying flavor profile made it an instant hit. The rise of fast food chains in the mid-20th century, like McDonald's founded in 1940, expanded in 1950s, cemented the hamburger's place as an American icon. A typical hamburger with cheese can range from 300 to 500 calories, offering a substantial and quick meal. But how precisely do the specific fatty acid profiles in beef contribute to its unique beefy flavor, and could we engineer plant-based alternatives to perfectly mimic this? The various Maillard reaction compounds from grilled meat interact differently with individual human olfactory receptors, explaining why some people prefer well done and others rare. And what unknown factors in the combination of soft bun, juicy meat, and crunchy toppings trigger such a potent, almost addictive, reward response in the human brain that makes us crave another one? Number 10, what makes a hot dog? So, distinctly American. Elvis was also known to enjoy hot dogs, another simple, quick, and satisfying food. It is often seen as a casual, fun food, especially at sporting events or picnics. But like all foods, there is a lot of science to it. A hot dog or frankfurter is a type of sausage. It is a processed meat product typically made from finely ground pork, beef, or a combination mixed with fat, water, and seasonings. The meat is emulsified, meaning the fat, water, and protein are blended into a stable mixture. This emulsion is crucial for the hot dog's smooth, uniform texture. If the emulsion breaks, the hot dog can become crumbly or greasy. Seasonings are important for flavor. These often include salt, garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, and sometimes curing agents like sodium nitrite. Sodium nitrite helps preserve the hot dog, inhibits bacterial growth, and gives it its characteristic pink color. It also contributes to the unique cured meat flavor. The hot dogs are then typically smoked, which adds another layer of flavor and further preserves them, and then cooked. When you cook a hot dog, say by grilling or boiling, the proteins denature and the fat melts slightly, giving it a juicy texture. If grilled, the Maillard reaction occurs on the surface, creating some browning and additional savory flavors. The snap of a natural casing hot dog is due to the collagen casing. Synthetic casings usually do not have the same snap. The bun is usually a soft, white roll. Like the hamburger bun, it provides a neutral backdrop and a soft texture. It is often steamed or lightly toasted. Condiments like mustard, ketchup, relish, and onions add layers of flavor. Mustard adds tang and pungency from compounds like L-isothiocyanate. Ketchup brings sweetness, acidity, and umami from tomatoes. Relish provides sweetness and crunch. Like these condiments often cut through the richness of the hot dog. Salt is present throughout, enhancing all the flavors. Hot dogs have a long history in Europe, particularly Germany, but they became an American icon in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, often sold by street vendors in cities like New York. The term hot dog may have originated from vendors selling Dachshund sausages at baseball games. Their portability and affordability made them popular with working-class people, and later a staple at family outings. A typical hot dog with bun and condiments can be around 250 to 350 calories, but what is the precise impact of sodium nitrite beyond preservation on the flavor profile of a hot dog, and could we achieve the same taste notes with entirely different, less debated compounds? Do specific types of fat emulsified into a hot dog contribute uniquely to its textural perception, or is all fat processed the same way by our palate in this context? And how much does the fun and casul association with hot dogs influence our hedonic response, separate from their actual chemical composition? Number 9. What is the secret to perfectly cooked pork chops? Pork chops were another meal Elvis enjoyed, showcasing a more traditional American dinner. Pork chops are cuts from the loin of the pig. They can be cooked in many ways: fried, grilled, baked, or pan-seared. The goal is always a tender, juicy chop with good flavor. Pork, like all meat, is primarily protein, fat, and water. The tenderness of a pork chop depends on the cut and how it is cooked. Leaner cuts, like loin chops, can dry out easily if overcooked. Slow cuts with more marbling intramuscular fat tend to stay juicier. When you cook a pork chop, whether pan frying or grilling, the Maillard reaction is key for flavor development. This browning on the surface creates savory, roasted, and slightly sweet notes. The heat causes the proteins in the meat to denature and coagulate. If cooked too long, these proteins tighten too much, squeezing out moisture and making the meat tough and dry. The optimal internal temperature for pork, according to the USDA, is 145 EGF 63 DC with a 3-minute rest, which results in a slightly pink, juicy chop. The fat on a pork chop, especially if it has a fat cap, also plays a role. As it cooks, this fat renders, basting the meat and adding to the flavor. It also prevents the surface from drying out. Searing the chop creates a crust and locks in juices, though the idea of locking in juices is a bit of a myth. Searing creates flavor on the surface. The moisture retention is more about cooking to the right internal temperature and allowing the meat to rest. Resting lets the muscle fibers relax and the juices redistribute throughout the chop. Seasonings like salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika are common. Salt enhances the natural flavors of the pork and helps to retain moisture through osmosis if applied well in advance of cooking. Brining pork chops, soaking them in a saltwater solution, is another technique to add moisture and flavor as the muscle fibers absorb water and salt. Pork has been a common protein source globally for thousands of years. In America, it has long been a staple, especially in the South. While pork chops became a popular cut in the 20th century as refrigeration and commercial meat processing made individual cuts more accessible, they represented a substantial and satisfying meal. A typical medium-sized pork chop, depending on the cut and fat content, can be around 250 to 400 calories, a hearty main dish. But what are the precise chemical changes in porcine muscle proteins that contribute to its distinctive pork flavor compared to other meats? And can these compounds be isolated or synthesized? How much does the specific feeding regimen of a pig, influencing its fat composition, truly impact the final sensory experience and perceived quality of a pork chop, beyond simple marketing? And are there unknown factors in the human gut microbiome that dictate an individual's preference or tolerance for specific types of animal fat found in pork? Number 8, what makes collard greens a soul food staple? Collard greens were a regular part of Elvis's diet, showing his connection to Southern soul food. This vegetable dish is often slow cooked with savory meat, creating a deeply flavorful and tender side. Collard greens are a leafy green vegetable, a member of the brassica family like cabbage and kale. They are high in fiber, vitamins especially K and A, and minerals. Raw collards are quite tough due to their thick cell walls and high fiber content. The cooking process for collard greens is essential. They are typically slow cooked for a long time, often for hours. This long cooking breaks down the tough cellulose fibers in the cell walls, making the greens tender and palatable. This process also releases some of their nutrients. Flavor is imparted through a fatback or ham hock. These are cuts of pork that are rich in fat and flavor. As they slowly cook, their fat renders out, and the meat releases savory umami compounds into the cooking liquid. This liquid, known as pot liquor, becomes highly flavorful and is considered a delicacy itself. The fat also helps to carry the flavors of the collards and the seasoning. Seasonings usually include salt, pepper, red pepper flakes, and sometimes a splash of vinegar at the end. The salt brightens the flavors. The red pepper adds a subtle heat that cuts through the richness. Vinegar adds acidity, which balances the savory and fatty notes and makes the flavors pop. This balance of fat, salt, and acid is a hallmark of good cooking. Collard greens are naturally somewhat bitter, containing glucosinolates, compounds common in cruciferous vegetables. The long cooking, especially with savory meats, helps to mellow this bitterness and transform it into a more complex, earthy flavor. Collard greens have been cultivated for thousands of years, and they became a staple in the American South, especially among enslaved people who used readily available ingredients and traditional slow cooking methods to transform humble vegetables into delicious, nutritious meals. They are a significant part of soul food cuisine. A serving of collard greens, especially with the added fat and protein from the ham hock, can provide moderate calories, often around 100 to 200 calories per serving, but with a wealth of micronutrients. But what are the precise chemical changes to glucosinolates during slow cooking that transform their bitter notes into more palatable, earthy flavors, and can this process be optimized for specific flavor outcomes? Do the various minerals and vitamins in collard greens interact synergistically with the animal fats and proteins in the ham hock, influencing their bioavailability or metabolic processing in unknown ways? And how much does the cultural significance and historical context of collard greens influence our perceived enjoyment and nutritional benefit of the dish, separate from its inherent chemical properties? Number 7, why do black-eyed peas carry so much cultural weight? Black-eyed peas were another common southern dish Elvis would have eaten, often served with cornbread. They are a simple, earthy legume dish, deeply rooted in southern and African American culinary traditions. Black-eyed peas are a type of cowpea. Like all legumes, they are rich in protein, fiber, and complex carbohydrate. They are low in fat. Dried peas need to be soaked and then cooked for a long time to make them tender and digestible. The soaking helps rehydrate them and reduces cooking time. When cooked, the starches in the peas gelatinize, making them soft and creamy. The high fiber content contributes to their texture and helps create a feeling of fullness. Similar to collard greens, black-eyed peas are often cooked with savory meat like ham hocks, bacon, or fatback. This adds fat and a rich, smoky, salty flavor to the peas. The rendered fat from the pork provides a vehicle for flavor, and the proteins in the meat contribute umami. The pot liquor from black-eyed peas is also highly prized. Seasonings like onions, garlic, salt, and pepper are common. Onions and garlic add aromatic depth. A splash of vinegar at the end can brighten the flavor and cut through the richness. Black-eyed peas have a fascinating history. They originated in West Africa and were brought to the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade. They became a staple crop in the South because they thrived in the hot climate and poor soils. They were a crucial source of nutrition for enslaved people. They also carry symbolic meaning in the South. Eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day is believed to bring good luck and prosperity for the coming year, a tradition with roots in the Civil War era. A serving of black-eyed peas with a ham hock can be around 200 to 300 calories, providing sustained energy. But what specific anti-nutrients present in legumes beyond what is currently understood might still be influencing nutrient absorption or gut health even after thorough cooking? Could the unique amino acid profile of black-eyed peas, when combined with specific animal proteins, create a more complete and bioavailable protein source than we realize? And how much do deeply ingrained cultural beliefs and rituals surrounding foods like black-eyed peas impact our physiological response, potentially enhancing perceived benefits or enjoyment beyond simple nutritional content? Number 6, what makes cornbread such a versatile staple? Cornbread was a constant on Elvis's table, a classic accompaniment to many Southern meals. It is a simple, quick bread made from cornmeal, offering a distinct texture and flavor. Cornbread's main ingredient is cornmeal, which is ground-dried corn. Cornmeal is primarily starch, but it also contains some protein and fiber. Unlike wheat flour, cornmeal does not contain gluten in any significant amount. This means cornbread has a crumbly, tender, rather than elastic texture. Like biscuits, cornbread is a quick bread, typically leavened with baking powder or baking soda. The chemical leavening agents produce carbon dioxide gas, which creates air pockets and helps the cornbread rise. Fat is important in cornbread. Often, a fat like bacon grease, butter, or oil is used, both in the batter and to grease the pan. Heating the fat in a cast iron skillet before adding the batter helps create a beautifully crisp browned crust. This browning is another instance of the Maillard reaction. The fat also contributes to the moistness and flavor of the cornbread. The ratio of cornmeal to flour, if flour is used, and the amount of sugar varies greatly. Southern-style cornbread is traditionally made with all cornmeal, little to no sugar, and often buttermilk. Buttermilk adds a tangy flavor, and its acidity reacts with baking soda to produce more leavening. Northern-style cornbread often includes some wheat flour and more sugar, resulting in a sweeter cake-like texture. When baked, the starches in the cornmeal gelatinize and the proteins coagulate. The crust gets crispy, and the inside stays moist and tender. The earthy, slightly sweet flavor of the cornmeal shines through. Cornbread is often served to sop up pot liquor from collard greens or black-eyed peas. This corn has been a staple crop in the Americas for thousands of years. Cornbread became a vital food in the American South, especially during times of scarcity, as corn was easy to grow and prepare. It was an economical and versatile bread, providing energy and fiber. By the mid-20th century, it was a ubiquitous part of Southern cuisine. A typical slice can be around 150 to 250 calories, depending on ingredients and size. But how do the unique starch structures in cornmeal contribute to its distinct textural experience? And are there specific genetic varieties of corn that offer superior sensory profiles for cornbread? Could the trace amounts of niacin found in cornmeal, particularly when processed with alkaline nixtamalization, though less common for cornbread, influence nutrient absorption or other physiological processes in ways we are only beginning to comprehend? And how much does the deep-seated cultural memory of cornbread as a symbol of resilience and sustenance amplify its perceived deliciousness and comfort for individuals from certain backgrounds? Number 5, what makes banana pudding so addictive? Banana pudding was a huge favorite for Elvis, a sweet and creamy dessert that is deeply comforting. It is a layering of simple ingredients that come together to create something much greater than the sum of its parts. The main components are bananas, vanilla wafers, and a creamy custard or pudding. Let's look at the bananas. As we discussed earlier, Ripe bananas are sweet due to the conversion of starches to sugars. They also have a soft texture and a distinct aroma. In banana pudding, the bananas soften further as they sit in the pudding, releasing their flavor into the creamy base. Vanilla wafers are thin, crisp cookies. They are primarily flour, starch, sugar, and fat. Their texture is key. When fresh, they are crunchy. But when layered into the pudding, they slowly absorb moisture, becoming soft and cake-like. This transformation from crisp to tender is a delightful textural change. The creamy pudding base is often a custard. Custard is made from milk, sugar, egg yolks, and a thickening agent like cornstarch or flour. The egg yolks contribute richness, color, and emulsifying properties. They contain lecithin, a natural emulsifier that helps stabilize the pudding. When heated, the proteins in the egg yolks coagulate and the starch is gelatinized, thickening the milk into a smooth, creamy consistency. The sugar adds sweetness, of course, but also affects the texture, making it more tender. Vanilla extract adds a crucial aromatic component. Sometimes a meringue topping is added. Meringue is made from egg whites and sugar, whipped until stiff. When baked, the proteins in the egg whites denature and coagulate, trapping air, creating a light, airy, and slightly brown topping Maillard reaction again. The crisp meringue provides a contrast to the soft pudding. The magic of banana pudding is the combination of textures and flavors, the sweetness of the bananas and pudding, the vanilla notes, the soft cookies, and sometimes the crisp meringue. It is a multi-sensory experience. Banana pudding became popular in America in the early 20th century, especially in the South. The invention of the vanilla wafer, Nabisco's Nilla wafers, were introduced in 1898, helped popularize the layered dessert. It became a potluck and family gathering staple, a relatively inexpensive and easy-to-make dessert that feeds a crowd. A typical serving can easily be 300 to 500 calories, a rich and satisfying sweet treat. But what precise enzymatic processes within the banana continue to transform its texture and flavor even after being incorporated into the pudding, and could this be manipulated for different sensory outcomes? Do the specific sugar types, sucrose, fructose, glucose in the bananas and pudding interact synergistically with our taste receptors to create an intensified sweetness beyond simple additive effects? And how much does the nostalgic and comforting association of banana pudding with childhood and family gatherings fundamentally alter its perceived deliciousness and emotional impact, separate from its actual chemical properties? Number 4. What makes a chocolate milkshake so irresistible? Elvis loved his chocolate milkshakes, a rich, cold, sweet treat. It is more than just milk and chocolate. It is an optimized blend of fat, sugar, and cold that creates a unique sensory experience. A milkshake is essentially an emulsion of milk fat and milk solids, mixed with sugar and flavorings, churned with ice. The primary ingredients are milk, ice cream, and chocolate syrup. Milk is mostly water, but it also contains fat, proteins, casein, and whey, and lactose milk sugar. Ice cream is an even more complex emulsion and foam. It is made from milk, cream, sugar, and often eggs, churned while freezing. The churning process incorporates air, making ice cream light and airy. The fat in cream milk fat contributes to the richness and smooth mouthfeel. Sugar lowers the freezing point, making the ice cream scoopable rather than rock hard. Chocolate syrup adds the key flavor. Chocolate itself is a complex mixture of cacao solids, cacao butter fat, and sugar. Cacao contains numerous flavor compounds, including polyphenols and amines, which give it its characteristic bitter, fruity, and roasted notes. When combined with sugar and milk, these flavors become mellowed and deeply satisfying. The fat in the chocolate syrup also contributes to the overall richness. When all these ingredients are blended together, several things happen. The ice cream melts slightly, releasing its fat and sugar into the milk. The blending process incorporates more air, making the milkshake thick and frothy. The cold temperature is crucial. Cold temperatures suppress some bitterness and enhance sweetness, making the overall experience more pleasant and refreshing. The fat in the milkshake coats the palate, delivering the chocolate flavor slowly and smoothly. This is what gives a milkshake its characteristic mouthfeel. The milkshake evolved from health tonic drinks of the late 19th century. By the early 20th century, with the invention of electric blenders, milkshakes became a popular treat in soda fountains and diners. The mid-20th century, when Elvis was popular, saw the rise of fast food restaurants, and milkshakes became a staple offering. They were an indulgent, easy-to-drink treat. A large chocolate milkshake can easily contain 600 to 1,000 calories, packed with sugar and fat. But what is the precise impact of temperature on our taste receptors' perception of sweetness and bitterness? And could we engineer specific compounds that enhance these effects in cold foods? Do the various alkaloids and polyphenols in chocolate interact with our brain's reward system in ways distinct from other sweet and fatty foods, perhaps contributing to its unique appeal? And how much does the viscous, cold, and rich mouthfeel of a milkshake contribute to a psychological sense of satisfaction, potentially signaling caloric intake in a way that bypasses typical satiety mechanisms? Number 3, why do donuts provide instant gratification? Elvis loved donuts, another classic sweet treat. A donut is a simple fried cake often covered in glaze or sugar. It is a masterclass in sugar, fat, and texture. A donut starts with a leavened dough, usually made from flour, sugar, eggs, milk, and yeast or baking powder. The yeast donuts are airy and chewy because the yeast ferments the sugars, creating carbon dioxide that makes the dough rise. Pre-cake donuts use chemical leavening, resulting in a denser, cakier texture. The dough is shaped and then fried in hot oil, typically around 350 to 375 DGF, 175 to 190 deg C. When the dough hits the hot oil, the water in the dough quickly turns to steam, causing the donut to puff up. This creates a light, airy interior. The starch on the surface of the dough gelatinizes and then dehydrates, forming a crust. The Maillard reaction occurs on the surface, giving the donut its golden brown color and adding complex flavors. The fat from the frying oil is absorbed into the donut. This adds to the richness, flavor, and moistness. Fat also slows down moisture loss, helping the donut stay soft. The glaze is another critical component. It is usually made from powdered sugar, milk or water, and vanilla. When applied to a warm donut, the glaze melts slightly and then dries, forming a thin, crisp, sweet shell. This adds an extra layer of sweetness and a contrasting texture. The high sugar content in both the donut and the glaze provides an immediate burst of energy and stimulates the brain's reward pathways. Fried donuts have a long history with various fried dough pastries found across many cultures. The modern donut, particularly the ring shape, gained popularity in America in the 19th century. Fried donut shops became common in the early 20th century, especially after World War I when donut lassies served them to soldiers, cementing their place as a comforting treat. Krispy Kreme, founded in 1937, became a major brand, and hot, fresh donuts were a common indulgence. A single glazed donut can contain around 250 to 400 calories, making it a calorie-dense treat. But what precise chemical changes occur to the fat molecules within the donut during frying that contribute to its unique mouthfeel and perceived richness? And how might these specific fats interact with our gut hormones? Do the various forms of sugar and starch in a donut trigger distinct or synergistic responses in the brain's reward system, leading to its powerful hedonic appeal? And how much does the sensory experience of a warm, soft, sweet, and fatty donut immediately after frying influence our memory and future cravings for such foods beyond purely biochemical triggers? Number 2, why is sweet tea so essential to Southern life? Sweet tea, a cold, sugary beverage, was a constant for Elvis. It is more than just a drink, it is a cultural cornerstone in the American South. The science is simpler than food, but it is still there. Sweet tea is essentially black tea, brewed and then heavily sweetened with sugar, and served cold over ice. The tea itself comes from the Camellia sinensis plant. Black tea is fully oxidized, which gives it its darker color and stronger flavor compared to green or white teas. It contains polyphenols, like tannins, which contribute to its astringency, that dry feeling in your mouth. It also contains caffeine, a stimulant. The brewing process extracts these compounds into the hot water. The temperature of the water and the brewing time affect the strength and flavor of the tea. Overbrewing can make the tea bitter due to excessive tannin extraction. The sugar is the key defining ingredient for sweet tea. A significant amount of sugar is dissolved in the hot tea. Sugar is a disaccharide sucrose that readily dissolves in water. When chilled, the sugar remains dissolved, providing a strong, sweet taste. The sweetness balances the bitterness and astringency of the black tea. In fact, the amount of sugar in sweet tea can be quite high, often equivalent to or exceeding that in many sodas. Serving it cold is also vital. The cold temperature makes the drink refreshing. It also affects our taste perception. Cold can mute some flavors, but can also make sweetness more pleasant and less cloying than it might be at room temperature. The ice dilutes the tea slightly as it melts, which can also soften the intensity of the flavor. Sweet tea's popularity in the South rose in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Ice became more widely available, and sugar was an important cash crop. It became the default beverage, replacing hot tea or coffee, especially in the hot southern climate. It was an affordable and thirst-quenching drink. A 16-ounce glass of sweet tea can contain anywhere from 25 to 50 grams of sugar, equating to 100 to 200 calories entirely from sugar. But what are the precise effects of high sugar concentration on the absorption of polyphenols and other bioactive compounds from black tea in the human digestive system? Do the specific chilling temperatures of sweet tea influence the perception of caffeine-stimulating effects, or simply make the overall experience more palatable? And how much does the deeply ingrained cultural identity and social ritual associated with sweet tea influence its perceived refreshment and emotional satisfaction separate from its actual physiological impact? Number one, why are potato chips the ultimate salty snack? Potato chips were another snack Elvis frequently consumed. They are simple but incredibly satisfying, hitting that perfect combination of salty, crunchy, and fatty. A potato chip starts as a potato, primarily starch and water. The potatoes are thinly sliced. This thinness is key for their texture. Frying is the crucial step. The thin slices of potato are deep fried in hot oil, typically vegetable oil. When they hit the hot oil, several things happen very quickly. The water in the potato rapidly turns to steam and escapes, causing the potato slice to crisp up. This is dehydration through frying. The starches on the surface gelatinize and then become rigid. The Maillard reaction occurs on the surface, giving the chips their golden brown color and adding a wide range of savory and roasted flavors. The fat from the frying oil is absorbed into the chip, contributing to its richness and flavor. Fat is a powerful flavor carrier and also creates a satisfying mouthfeel. Salt is applied immediately after frying. The heat helps the salt adhere to the surface. Salt is not just a flavor in itself. It enhances all the other subtle flavors of the potato and the frying process. It makes the chip taste more potato-y and more fried. The combination of salt, fat, and crunch is incredibly rewarding to our brains. Dr. Michael Moss's work highlights this bliss point in salty snacks. The fat, sugar, and salt together create a potent appeal that food scientists have perfected. The texture is vital. The crisp, shattering crunch of a potato chip is a huge part of its appeal. This texture provides auditory and tactile pleasure. Some chips are ripple cut, which increases their surface area and creates an even more satisfying crunch, and also allows more salt and seasoning to cling to them. Potato chips were accidentally invented in 1853 by Chef George Crumb at Moon's Lake House in Saratoga Springs, New York, when a customer kept sending back his fried potatoes for being too thick. Crumb sliced them paper thin, fried them, and salted them excessively as a prank, but the customer loved them. Chips became a mass-produced snack in the early 20th century, especially with the invention of the mechanical potato peeler in the 1920s. By the time Elvis was popular, they were a ubiquitous snack. A standard bag of potato chips 1 ounce contains about 150 to 160 calories, mostly from fat and carbohydrates. But what is the precise neurological response to the auditory crunch of a potato chip? And could we engineer entirely new crunchy textures that trigger even stronger hedonic responses? Do the specific fatty acid profiles of different frying oils contribute uniquely to the absorption and lingering flavor of salt on a chip? Or is the effect largely uniform? And how much does the sheer accessibility and low cost of potato chips influence our consumption patterns and the development of habitual snacking behaviors separate from their inherent flavor profile?